Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Total Mind Fitness. And Total Mind Fitness is a new blog, and hopefully, we will manage to continue and do a series of these. The idea is to bring a conversation, bring to the front of our awareness living in total mind fitness. Now, what is total mind fitness? Well, first of all, we can understand that the middle word is mind. And what is mind? Well, there isn't really any official definition of mind. If you look to some Eastern and ancient languages, then you'll find that they don't even maybe have a word for mind, or the word for mind is the same as the word for heart. In any case, we're not going to get into all these wordy type issues here on this show. Basically, what we're discussing when we're discussing mind is what we all understand is mind, our conscious being, the thoughts and memories and visions and things that go on in our minds, in our heads. Another thing we have to define, I suppose, in total mind fitness is the word total. And total means that although a lot of what's going to be discussed on this program will be taken from contextual behavioral science, or more commonly known as acceptance and commitment, in this case, training. Sometimes it's known as acceptance and commitment therapy. But this show is not about therapy, it's not about pathology, it's not about diagnosis, it's about high quality living. And so, total means that we're going to be discussing all sorts of different ideas, basically, and methods and things that we can come across to make our lives a little bit more qualitative and enjoyable, and understanding how we can deal with what's known as the human condition. And we'll learn about that as we go on. There'll be reoccurring themes in this program as we go through the different episodes. And the final word in total mind fitness is fitness. And fitness, as opposed to pathology, as opposed to disease or diagnosis, fitness is about keeping to our optimum levels. It's not about being broken and having to be fixed. It's about staying fit. It's about keeping to our optimum levels of mindful living. So together, total mind fitness is basically an idea. And the idea is that we get together and try to build our personal total mind fitness, our personal resilience, and influence those in our friends and families around us. And as families and friends, we can influence our communities. And as communities, we can influence and nurture our society. And basically try to get and build a society that's nurtured, that promotes well-being and promotes helping each other and promotes basically the common good. Basic values, probably, I would say. The idea of being decent human beings, decent to ourselves, as well as being decent to others. And that's basically what this program is going to be about. Today's program is going to focus, if you like, on parenting. And we've got a lot of stuff that I want to try and bring out in this program. So we've got parenting, what's important about parenting, what are some of the myths about parenting. Also, we've got two great animation videos from a friend of mine called Russ Harris. He's from Australia. He's a great acceptance and commitment trainer. And we'll be bringing a couple of videos for him explaining things like what is anxiety and how maybe we can understand and accept it better. And also, a little bit of a perspective of how we can deal with all these thoughts and memories and sometimes uncomfortable things that go on in our heads. So that's coming up. And also what's coming up is we'll be doing mindful exercise. So this might be your first mindful exercise. It might be your first guided kind of meditation. Basically, we'll be taking a time out. We'll be using a guided version of what's called Leaves on the Stream. Hopefully that will prove to be for you an enjoyable experience. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to be talking about parenting, and when it comes to parenting, by the way, the idea of this show is to be interactive. It's the first one we're doing, so and it's going out on Facebook Live. You might be watching it on different of our groups and pages. So you might be coming through and watching it on our group on the book that's coming out in the summer, Mind Over Terror, which is based on the events in the United Kingdom, horrific events last spring and summer. So if you're coming from that group, it's still relevant what we're going to be talking about, because we're talking about mind over terror, and the terror doesn't have to be coming from a terrorist attack. Terror can be coming from the terrors that awaken up inside us in the different contextual parts of our lives. So in today's show, we're talking about parenting, so stay with us on that. You might be coming through to us on our ACT support group, which we've got over 1,500 members. So if you're coming through there, well, it's the obvious common factor here is that we're talking about ACT, and hopefully this will help you. Not just, you don't have to be a parent, you might just be interested in changing your behavior and finding out a little bit more about ACT. So wherever you're coming through from, you might even be listening to this on the audio podcast, and so you're welcome to. So basically, the idea of the show is to be interactive, and so you're welcome to make comments. So we've got Boaz here, we've got Devora, we've got Karine Steen-Travers has joined. So you're welcome to join and write your questions and be and make it an interactive show. Anyway, so parenting is about basically taking care of younger human beings. They're not always our biological children. Parenting can be from foster children or adopted children. But I'd like to even widen that circle and say that what is relevant is about looking after others. So you might be in a situation where you're responsible, basically, for children, growing human beings, and it can be from zero age and basically endless. But what we're talking about here is probably until the end of adolescence. Now, adolescence is commonly intertwined with the word teenager, but that is not really an exact description of what adolescence is. Adolescence is basically 12, although it's reaching lower numbers these days, as low as 8 for some girls when they're entering into puberty that early now. And it can go up to 25 years old. Basically, there's a whole theories going around about the stretching of adolescence. So from 12 to 25, some might even say till 30. In any case, what we are talking about in this particular show is up to that age of 25. So young adults as well. Hold on, I think we've got a technical thing here. Yeah, we're all still here. So, as parents, one of the things, especially in this day and age, and it doesn't actually matter where you are from in the world. Basically, the way the world is now, the world is small, and the world's going through a lot of technological changes, a lot of financial changes, and this puts strain on the carers of children, on parents of children. And so, whether you're stay at home parents or whether you're working, we're all going through. I'm a father of four children and a grandfather of three. And we go through a lot of concerns on a daily basis um, on the welfare of those young people that are dependent on us. First of all, having young people being dependent on one um, is in itself a massive responsibility. And that massive responsibility takes resources from us. So, whether those resources are physical resources, financial resources, time resources, also takes up our psyche resources and our energy. And so, right off before we've done anything, there's a whole lot of resources being used up just from the fact that you've become a parent or you become responsible for a young human being. Now, the idea of the fact that they're young um, puts sometimes legal responsibility. It's true, over 18, then we don't really have any legal responsibilities. But up until 18, we're also legally responsible whether we like it or not. So that again adds another layer of resources that are being used up. One of the things that affect a lot of parents that I deal with is the fact that they have this notion, this feeling, this fear that they are not good enough at their parenting skills. So you might get a lot of mothers saying, I'm a bad mother. I should be doing more for them. I should be, I'm having to juggle working and being a parent at the same time. You might have a father, and these gender positions these days can be interchangeable. I'm just using it for the purpose of simple an explanation. But you might have a situation where you have a father who's out there working in a full-time job, maybe traveling, and maybe has this situation where he feels guilty that he's not helping his wife, that he's not being at home more with the children, and he's basically disconnected. That, if you like, is the classic, um, you know, family situation that we've been taken through the ages. Of course, today families can be made up of all sorts of different types of parents, sometimes even just the one parent. Of course, all these different versions of families these days has its own issues that go along with it and that tax our resources. So, what do we do about this? What is the solution? If we add into this pressure pot that we're cooking here, also the competitiveness that goes on in this world these days. I mean, people are signing up their children for the better schools and kindergartens from the day they're born. They're wanting them to get into the best kindergartens and into the best primary schools and high schools and grammar schools and colleges and universities and so on and so forth. And there's this big sense of competition between human beings, that they're brought up in these institutions of education, if you like, but they're highly, highly competitive. And this again adds pressure to these young people, and the more that the pressure that these young people are in, the more pressure it kind of lands back on the carer or parent's doorstep. So we have that issue as well. And then if we throw into the pot even more ingredients of all the technology and screens that are going on now. And this is not just from a technological point of view, it's from a sociological point of view. We're talking about people that are going through their lives lacking certain experiences that maybe will teach them very important skills. One of the most researched and proven protective factors in having quality life is having a social life, is being able to interact with other human beings, with having circles of friends, with having circles of people that you feel comfortable and trustworthy with. A safe haven, if you like. This is very important to every human being. And the more time that we spend on screens and the more time that we spend in our own rooms, and this goes for adults as well as children, the less time we're going to have real human interaction. And even in the workplace these days, there's a lot of work that can be taken and done from home. And this again adds to that feeling of isolation and loneliness. And that in itself has its own repercussions with regard to well-being and state of mind. So if we're bundling all this into the pressure cooker here, no wonder we have a situation where people are generally feeling overwhelmed a lot of the time. And that's whether you're an adult that's taking care of a younger person or whether you're that younger person themselves. There's a lot of pressure and a general feeling that I don't have the resources to cope with this. So, what can we do about this? Well, neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology and neuropsychology and behavioral science is basically coming up with answers and general direction and what we can do about these things. And I think the starting place has to be the individual, has to be me as a parent. Because just like when we're told when we're flying a plane and if it gets into any difficulty and the oxygen mask comes down from above, the instructions are to first put the oxygen mask on ourselves before we help anybody else. And this makes a lot of sense. So I think that is the place that we have to start also as parents. We have to understand who we are. We have to understand what we can do about our own situations and pressures and uncomfortable feelings. Once we know how to deal with ourselves and accept ourselves for who we are and what happens to us in the circumstances that we're in, we'll automatically broadcast that feeling to those around us. And our children will definitely pick up on us. One of the biggest parts of the education of our children is our own modelling. Whether we think it when we know it or not, or whether we think it or not, our children are constantly absorbing how we talk, how we behave, how we react to situations, how we work out situations, how we react to stress, how we react to them. They're constantly recording this and sponging it up. And this is what will be the basis of their learning in regarding behavior, probably for the rest of their lives. So it's really important that we get ourselves comfortable with who we are. One of the things I think we can start off from the very outset, and that is to begin to accept that in the main we're good enough parents. In the main, one of the main things about parenting is making sure that our children are safe and that they have the basic necessities that they need in order to live. So food, shelter, and comfort and warmth and love. When a child and a human being has that love and support and that feeling that there's somebody there for them, they can become very resilient. And so that's something that we have to cultivate in ourselves, is that sense of calmness, that sense of understanding of who I am and accepting who I am. Now that's all fair and good, you might say, but what about all the pressures that we've just spoken about? What about the finances and the bills and the screaming that goes on in the mornings, and that everybody has to get out on time, and that the school's phoning me and my work's phoning me and there's pressures? What about all that? That's true. And that all builds up inside us and gives us the impression that we are lacking resources. So one of the things that we can do is to learn to take our own time out, to learn to be compassionate with ourselves and understand that we are dealing with all these things. And that it's not a pathological situation, it's a normal situation. This is our life. This is the context in which we live. So in order to start understanding if there's anything that we need to change, we have to understand where we are actually at this moment. Now there are two basic environments that we can be talking about. There's the external environment, things that go on around us outside of our body, and there's the internal environment, what goes on under our skin, if you like. So then we have our sensations that go in through our body, our feelings and our emotions and our thoughts and our memories and our urges. So we have these two different environments. And how we deal with these two different environments are very different. Let's take the external environment to begin with. Well, that's an environment that we're actually very expert in how to deal with. That's a problem-solving environment. If we don't have enough money, then we can maybe work harder, work longer hours, get another job, get extra jobs. We understand what we need to do in order to get more of that resource. If there's something frightening that's happening in that environment, well then we basically know what we need to do. Either we can go and get help from somebody, or we can run away, or we can fight it. The whole world has been built, the whole external world has been built by the human ability to problem solve. The human brain is probably the best problem solving machine, if you like, that exists in this world. Everything that you see, look around you, was done by somebody's idea of problem solving. So let's put that aside for a minute, because we're pretty good at that. And if we're not, well, then we can always learn how to problem solve a little better. What we're not taught so much is what do we do on the inside? What happens to us in the internal environment? So we have a situation where we have dealing with everyday matters. We have those thoughts that come up. These thoughts arise and tell us that we're no use. These thoughts arrive and tell us that we're not doing it as best as we should, and that people are looking at us, and that we have, to keep up with the community that we live in, or the family is not, are disappointed in the way that we're doing things, and we've got pressure coming from other people, and we feel that pressure building up in our bodies. And that anxiety is beginning to take over, and we're beginning to add to that anxiety by these very intrusive and disturbing thoughts that are beginning to take place. And now we begin to think maybe there's something wrong with me. I'm anxious all the time. I'm feeling these horrible sensations in my stomach or my shoulders. I'm beginning to get tired. And so I'm now becoming anxious of being anxious. And this just adds and adds and adds to this feeling of discomfort. And eventually I begin to convince myself, because of the situation that I'm feeling myself in, that there must be something maybe wrong with me. And so there's a good possibility that eventually I'll pop myself off to the doctor. And the doctor might agree that I have some sort of anxiety and prescribe me with some sort of anxiety reducing medicine. And this will reinforce, of course, the idea that, I'm not really coping very well and I'm very anxious. So I'd like to bring a different perspective on that idea of being anxious. And maybe anxious is an emotion that is there to help us. Maybe that anxiety is there to move us in certain directions. So Russ Harris has a brilliant short animation clip on anxiety that I'd like you to see. So if you give me a second. It's about struggling with our anxiety. Let's have a look at this.
Have you ever noticed how easy it is to get pulled into a struggle with your own thoughts and feelings?
It often seems like we've got a struggle switch at the back of our mind. And as soon as an uncomfortable emotion, a painful feeling or memory shows up, it's like the struggle switch goes on and we start to struggle with it.
Are all our positive thoughts and feelings, and
so
the black pieces
let's
are all
suppose
our negative
anxiety
thoughts and
shows up.
feelings.
A very
And we
common,
get so
painful
invested
emotion
in
that we all
trying
get
to
to
win this
experience.
battle.
Anxiety
We
shows
try
up.
to move the
The
white pieces,
struggle
our
switch goes
positive
on.
thoughts and feelings,
Oh,
to
here's
dominate
anxiety.
the
I don't
thought.
like anxiety. I
And we
want to
try
get rid of my
wipe out
anxiety.
all the
Now
black
I've got
pieces,
anxiety
get rid
about
of
my
all the
anxiety.
negative thoughts and
So it's
feelings.
getting bigger.
But
With
there
the
are
struggle
at least
switch on,
two
I now
problems
get,
with going
oh,
through
my
life
anxiety's
this
getting
way.
bigger. How do I get rid of my anxiety?
Firstly,
Now I've
there's
got
an
even
infinite
more
number of
anxiety.
white and
With the
black
struggle switch on,
pieces.
I may then
So this
get
battle
angry
is
about my
never
anxiety.
won.
Why is this
It's
anxiety
ongoing
keep showing up?
forever.
I hate this
The
anxiety.
other problem is
Then
that
I
white
might even
pieces
start to feel
actually
sad
attract black
about my
pieces.
anger. Oh,
You
is
move
this
the
my
white
life?
piece and a
Oh,
good friend,
and then I
it
may
attracts
start
the
to
black
feel
piece.
guilty
No,
about my
not.
sadness
What
about my
the time
anger.
you
Oh,
did
how
that?
pathetic am I when
You
there's
move the
starving
white
kids in
piece. I
Africa?
accept
So with
myself.
my
It
struggle
attracts the
switch
black
on,
piece.
my
No, you
emotions
don't.
get
What about your
amplified.
thighs?
I've
What
now
about your
got
stretch
guilt
marks?
about
What
my
about your
sadness, about my
pot belly?
anger, about my anxiety, about
So
my
what about
anxiety.
if we could
And that
learn
kind
how
of
to be like
amplification
the
of emotions gives
The
them
board
more
is
impact
not
and influence
involved
over
in
my
the
life and
battle.
often gets me
The
bogged
board is
down or
intimate
pulls me into
contact with the
self-defeating
pieces, it
behaviors.
holds the pieces, but it's not fighting. If we can
Now,
learn to
what
be more like
happens
the
if I
board,
can
to
switch
step back
off
and
the
watch
struggle
our
switch?
thoughts and feelings,
With the
to
struggle
make
switch
room
off,
for them, to let
anxiety
them
shows
flow
up.
through
And it's
us
not that I like
without
it or
getting
want
caught
it
up
or
in a
approve of
fight
it.
or a
It's just,
conflict or a
I'm not
struggle.
going to struggle
We're
with
in a
it.
much
I'm not
better
going to
position
invest
create
my
a rich,
time,
full,
energy, and
meaningful
effort
life.
in struggling
Because
with
we
this
can
anxiety.
invest our
Instead, I'm going to
time and
invest
effort
it
and
in
energy
doing meaningful,
acting on our
life-enhancing
values,
activities,
behaving like the
such as
person we
spending
really
quality
want to
time
be,
with my friends
instead
and
of
family,
investing it in a
playing with my
futile
kids.
struggle with our own thoughts
Now,
and feelings.
with the struggle switch off, the anxiety is free to move. It may get higher, it may get lower, it may move quickly, it may move slowly, but the point is it's free to move. It doesn't get amplified by all of these other emotions which make it kind of bigger and stickier and make it hang around for a lot longer. So there's no such thing as a life without anxiety. It shows up for all of us. But when anxiety shows up and the struggle switch is off, it's so much easier to live with than when the struggle switch is on.
So, quite clear there from Russ about how anxiety can lead to anxiety about anxiety, and we begin to struggle with this. And so we take our everyday situation as parents, and things are going on, and we're struggling, and we're getting anxious about getting everybody out on time, and getting the sandwiches ready, and getting the parents' night, and getting back from work in order to get. This begins to build up, and we begin to struggle with it. And the more we struggle with it, the more we're feeling these sensations in our body. And these sensations in our body is something that is extremely uncomfortable. And so we've been told maybe we should be thinking of good thoughts, and so we start to think good thoughts. But good thoughts in itself bring intrusive thoughts, because for every good thought there's a bad thought. For every beautiful sunset that I'm looking at, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, maybe I should have been doing something else and not wasting my time looking at the sunset. For every time that I feel, oh, maybe I should relax, I'm getting the feeling that maybe I'm guilty and shouldn't be wasting my time relaxing. So we have to understand that these thoughts are constantly going through our head. We're going to get thoughts that are pleasant, we're going to get thoughts that are unpleasant. And this way of looking at things is new for a lot of people. We're not taught about this. We're not taught that these thoughts are going to be churned out in our brain on a constant basis. This is part of being human. I mean, there's a whole scientific explanation for this that there's no need to go into right now, but just understand at least that our brain is there producing thoughts on a constant basis. Some of these thoughts we can buy into, and some of these thoughts we don't need to buy into. But they're there anyway. And so one way of diffusing, if you want to use an ACT word, from these thoughts, in other words, a lot of these thoughts can be sticky, and that can start to direct the way that we live our lives. So one of the ways that we can deal with this is by being mindful of these thoughts. So I thought maybe we can do a mindful exercise in which I will guide you, and we can do it together, and it'll only take a couple of minutes. So if you're interested in joining in, then we'll just leave the screen blank for the next couple of minutes, and I will direct you in this mindful exercise. Okay? So get yourself into a comfortable position, and that can be just sitting on your seat with your feet touching the floor, legs not crossed, and you can put your palms of your hands on your knees. Sit up reasonably straight. You shouldn't do this if you're driving or working any hard machinery, so take yourself a break. And if you're lying down, you can do this lying down as well. So basically, I'd like you to picture for yourself sitting by a river, by a stream. It can be a stream that you've been to before that is somewhere pleasant that you like to visit. Or it can be somewhere that you've never been to and you're just using your imagination. And as you sit gently on the bank of this river, listening to the sounds of the water, you can see the sun rays reflecting off this beautiful flowing stream. The sun is out. The air is fresh. There might be a slight cool breeze. And if you listen carefully, you might hear in the distance the sound of children laughing and playing, ever so slightly. And by the river, by the banks of the stream, there are trees going off into the distance as well as close by. And every so often, a leaf will fall slowly from the branches of the tree and flutter, flutter, flutter on its way down towards the water. And when it lands on the stream, it flows down with the water gently, passing you as you sit there watching. And it flows right past and off into the distance. And then again, another leaf will detach itself from the branch and flutter, flutter down into the flowing stream and gently float by as you watch this leaf flowing on top of the water off into the distance. Now you might find when you're doing this exercise that your mind starts to wander and thoughts of different things will enter into your mind. It might be about this exercise, it might be about my voice, it might be something completely different. It might be something about what you did this morning or yesterday or last week, or something you're feeling anxious about that might happen later on today or tomorrow. And these thoughts come in to your mind and try to take your attention. And where we give attention to, we give energy to. And sometimes these thoughts can take our attention and take us way off task. And so what we can do is, we can take this thought, and when that leaf falls off the tree and lands on the water, we can gently place the thought on the leaf. In our imagination, we can do anything. And so we take that uncomfortable thought and we imagine putting it on the leaf as it flows in front of us. And we can just watch that thought on the leaf flowing by. And we just watch. And then another thought. We can place that too on another leaf. And as we sit there gently, we watch as that thought goes by on the leaf and off into the distance with the water. And as we do that, we can pay attention to the different feelings that we have in our body. We may feel tingling in our stomachs, we may feel pressure in our shoulders, or anything else that goes on in our bodies. We don't need to do anything, just pay attention that it's there. And when we find ourselves wandering off again, we can just bring our attention back again to those leaves as they fall from the tree into the water. And as our thoughts come in our head, we can just gently place them on the leaf and watch as they slowly float on by. Now this exercise, like any exercise, if you go to the gym to exercise physically, or whether you're in this Mind Academy exercising psychologically, it takes effort, it takes practice, and one has to repeat as many times as we can in order to become proficient in it and for it to take effect. And so sometimes it can be quite annoying to begin with, but the more that we practice this, the more that our brains will begin to learn that when we get these thoughts that don't seem to leave us and seem to distract us and take us off task and annoy us and cause us to become anxious and at times depressed, we can take those thoughts and we can put them on the leaves and watch these leaves as they float down the river and off into the distance. And that is called a diffusion exercise. Okay, so I hope that was reasonably enjoyable and it's clear on how to do that leaves on the stream exercise. And I suggest that we do this at least once a day, if not more, and get our minds used to being able to diffuse these sometimes disturbing and uncomfortable thoughts. Okay, so we're going to be finishing off soon, and what I'd like to do is to bring you back again to Russ Harris and give you a different perspective on how we can look at these things that go on inside us in that environment internally. A lot of the times we struggle with our thoughts and we try to think of good thoughts to combat the bad thoughts. Sometimes that's maybe a bit of a futile exercise and just continues this struggle and this war. So have a look at this. If you like chess, you'll like this a lot. But if you don't like chess, hopefully it's clear enough for you to understand the different way of taking perspective of our minds.
Have you ever noticed how easy...
Okay, so that's not the right one. Here we go.
Have you ever noticed how easy it is to get pulled into a struggle with your own thoughts and feelings?
It often seems like we've got a struggle switch at the back of our mind, and as soon as an uncomfortable emotion, a painful feeling or memory shows up, it's like the struggle switch goes on and we start to struggle with it.
Are all our positive thoughts and feelings, and
so
the black pieces
let's
are all our
suppose
negative
anxiety
thoughts and
shows up.
feelings.
A very
And we
common,
get so
painful
invested
emotion
in
that we all
trying
get
to
to
win this
experience.
battle.
Anxiety shows
Try
up.
to move
The
white pieces,
struggle switch
our
goes on.
positive thoughts and feelings,
Oh, here's
dominate
anxiety.
the
I don't
thought.
like anxiety. I want to get rid of my anxiety.
All
Now
black
I've got
pieces,
anxiety
get rid
about
of
my
all the
anxiety.
negative thoughts and
So it's
feelings.
getting bigger.
But
With
there
the
are
struggle
at least
switch
two
on, I now
problems
get,
with going
oh,
through
my
life
anxiety's getting
this way.
bigger. How do I get rid of my anxiety?
Firstly,
Now I've
there's
got
an
even
infinite
more
number of
anxiety.
white and
With the
black
struggle switch on,
pieces.
I may then
So this
get
battle
angry
is
about my
never
anxiety.
won.
Why does this
It's
anxiety
ongoing
keep showing up?
forever.
I hate this anxiety.
The other problem is
Then
that
I
white
might even
pieces
start to feel
actually
sad
attract black
about my
pieces.
anger. Oh,
You
is
move
this
the
my
white
life?
piece and a
Oh,
good friend,
and then I
it
may
attracts
start
the
to
black
feel
piece.
guilty
No,
about my
not.
sadness
What
about my
the time
anger.
you
Oh,
did
how
that?
pathetic am I when
You
there's
moved the
starving
white
kids
piece.
in
I
Africa?
upset
So
myself with my
It
struggle
attracts the
switch
black
on,
piece.
my
No, you
emotions
don't.
get
What about your
amplified.
thighs?
I've
What
now
about your
got
stretch
guilt
marks?
about
What
my
about
sadness,
your
about my
pot belly?
anger, about my anxiety, about
So
my
what about
anxiety.
if we could
And that
learn
kind
how
of
to be like
amplification
the
of emotions gives
The
them
board
more
is
impact
not
and influence
involved
over
in
my
the
life, and
battle.
often gets me
The
bogged
board is
down or
intimate
pulls me into
contact with the
self-defeating
pieces. It
behaviors.
holds the pieces, but it's not fighting. If we can
Now,
learn to
what
be more like
happens
the
if I
board,
can
to
switch
step back
off
and
the
watch
struggle
our
switch?
thoughts and feelings,
With the
to
struggle
make
switch
room
off,
for them, to let
anxiety
them
shows
flow
up,
through
and
us
it's not that I like
without
it or
getting
want
caught
it
up
or
in a
approve of
fight
it.
or a
It's just
conflict or a
I'm not
struggle.
going to struggle
We're
with
in a
it.
much
I'm not
better
going to
position to
invest
create
my
a
time,
ritual,
energy, and
meaningful
effort
life,
in struggling
because
with
we
this
can
anxiety.
invest our
Instead, I'm going to
time and
invest
effort
it
and
in
energy
doing
in
meaningful,
acting on our
life-enhancing
values,
activities,
behaving like the
such as
person
spending
we really
quality
want to
time
be,
with my friends
instead
and
of
family,
investing it in
playing
a
with my
futile
kids.
struggle with our own thoughts
Now,
and feelings.
with the struggle switch off, the anxiety is free to move.
Okay, so that's us back again. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of how to take a perspective on these different thoughts that are going through. Try to think of ourselves as the board, the container. If you like, you can use the idea of the sky. And our moods and our thoughts are the clouds coming through the sky. They come in and eventually they leave. There's a lot of concepts and a lot of information that we've discussed today, and I can understand if it's a little bit muddled at the moment, but the more that we go through these shows, the more that we will begin to repeat and understand them a little bit in more detail. But the idea is that once we start to have this inner acceptance, compassion for the things that are going on inside us, then we'll be better prepared to begin to deal with these external everyday things that go on in our lives, and particularly when it's to do with young children and all their needs and demands and taking of our resources in regarding of looking after them. So that's basically the first show, and I'll be looking forward to your comments and anything that you'll be interested in that we did discuss. I hope that for a first show that was reasonably painless and that there was something of value there for you. And until next time, I'm Benyaacov, and I'm glad that you joined me.